Welcome to the Common Creative Podcast. My name's Paul Fairweather, and Chris, Meredith and I are on a mission to open up the discussion about creativity in business and life through the lens of ideas, stories and visual communication. And today I am interviewing Chris about a new project that he has. I would say project, he says project, you say project, I say project, the Spice Project. So Chris, the Spice Project is a book that you're writing, so take it away.
The Spice Project is a challenge to everyone in business to add a bit of spice to the way they work and to unlock their creative. Even in the white heat of a big business with rules, bureaucracy, jargon, language, status, all those things that they have to navigate, how can you unlock your creative in that kind of environment? And the whole project, it actually comes from a keynote I do, but it's inspired by my own personal experience of working in big organizations, which demand innovation, they demand agility, they demand creativity, and yet the environment they promote and create in those big organizations kills it. Big businesses don't like new ideas. They can evaluate them, critique them, analyze them, do all sorts of things to destroy new thinking, even though that's what they say they want. And it's bad for business because they need new thinking. But for me, the much bigger cost is on human beings who want to express themselves, who want to be creative, who want to do interesting things. And they're just ground down by the job descriptions and the bureaucracy that stops anything interesting happening. That is the Spice Project.
That is the Spice. And so, Chris, I've known you for a long time. So the Spice bit, I know that your business is called Chili Sauce and you make your own chili sauce. So I can see that's where it's coming from. But it's more than just adding a bit of sauce, isn't it? It's not just, and I suppose proper cooking, has spices embedded in it. And really, that's what I do. It's not.
It is, although I think it is a reference to the fact that we don't want creativity kind of running around all over the place all the time. But big businesses have to have a set of rules. They have to have ways of working. I'm not trying to challenge the benefits of that. In fact, one of the messages in the Spice Project is to separate the moments when you trying to be creative, you're trying to think what if this and break some rules. You separate that stage from the stage when you're evaluating, critiquing, and so on. You can't mix them up. So in that sense, we're not trying to infuse spice throughout everything because you'd end up with chaos. But I am saying there are moments when you should allow the spice to run riot, and you should be prepared to not know, and you should be safe to say things or develop ideas that might seem revolutionary. If you don't have those safe spaces, then you never come up with anything new.
Okay, so maybe not too much, maybe not too easy on the spice at times.
Easy on the spice at times. I love the metaphor with spice and chilies. I love chilies. I grow them in the garden and make my own chili sauce. But chilies contain capsaicin. That's the thing that gives the heat in chilies. And capsaicin releases endorphins in the body. They make you feel happy. And so the idea that chilies make you feel happy and the Spice Project can make people at work feel happy, I think the metaphor is so good. I couldn't resist going with it.
It was great. Actually, there's a couple of sort of analogies there, that I sort of pick up on. And one is this thing that, a meal with no spice is bland. And whilst, we know that the businesses need to do the pragmatic things, you also talk about the fact that it's not only about innovation, but it's also about making a better culture. So if we do this, then the underlying culture, as Leaf has got a bit of flavor to it. So it's not so bland.
You're right. I can imagine a meal with no salt, no pepper. It would just be vanilla flavored, I suppose. And I think the idea that to be open to spice, to pick a word from your book, Paul, that we're all of us a bit quirky, and the idea of embracing that and celebrating those differences, in fact, using those differences to kind of develop something new and different and to explore new ideas is very helpful. And the battle is those companies that try and put everything in straight lines and regiment everything. A particular thing about job descriptions, if you have kind of the code, the machine code for being an operative at a workplace, why can't you be you in the workplace? The very first spark for the whole Spice project came from my experience as a junior marketing person in a massive company and tried to do a press release for the simplest, most standard promotion you could do for a shampoo brand that I used to run. And I decided to do 20% extra free, a kind of a routine promotion that, it isn't going to win any awards or break any news. And the company had a sign-off sheet for the press release, which had 10 signatures on it. You had to get sign-off from the head of R&D, the head of sales, the head of category, the head of finance, the company secretary, the managing director, the marketing director, and the chambermaid and everybody else. And that is the bureaucracy that the Spice project is designed to battle. Because after a while, when you've got your 9th signature and so-and-so's commenting on some irrelevant aspect of your boring promotion, you give up. You go, I ain't going to bother with my 20% extra free promotion. In fact, I'm not going to bother with anything. I'll just do what's on my job description. And you can't fire me because I'm doing my job. But am I doing anything worthwhile? That's what the Spice project's about. Do worthwhile stuff.
Yeah, I like that, Chris. And one of the things that I think also about, you're thinking about spices is that, again, you said before, without salt or pepper, and we started talking about chili. The reality is in any recipe, it's very rare to say and add cumin, or add turmeric, or, it's always a mixture. And I think that in terms of, the creativity, I'm assuming, where you're going is that, there's many different flavors that come together to create an outcome. So it's not about, you're not saying that everyone should all be the same creative person. It's really about trying to get that different flavor or different take from different people that come together to make something different.
That's a brilliant thought. The ultimate contradiction in terms that we all become the same creative person. It's exactly the opposite. It's just about celebrating the differences. There are different kinds of thinkers, people who are very good with the early stages of some kind of new initiative and can think very expansively. And equally at the other end of the spectrum, something that's almost finished, they can think very creatively about how to implement something. In fact, that's one of the great opportunities for creativity in the workplace is when a big idea is due to be launched or brought to market or is close to the end of its process. Of course, you don't need people being creative about, why don't we do this and why don't we do that? Because a lot of it is set in stone. But you do need people to be creative in thinking, how do I implement it? How do I communicate it? How do I get feedback on it? So there are so many different opportunities to be creative without breaking or disrupting the heart of the machine that most big businesses are. And I think we forget that at our peril because you switch off. If you get ground down, you ground your spices down too much, you just go back to vanilla again.
I love that thing about grounding down is we want to be grounded, but not in that way.
Yes, exactly.
Not the nose to the grindstone.
Yes.
So, Chris, the Spice Project is a book. It'll be a physical book. You're 80% of the way through it. It'll be an ebook. And also it's come from a keynote.
Yeah. So I do a keynote on the Spice Project, and I think the thing that's different about the keynote is it's designed to be very practical. It's if this were a cooking book, I want everyone to cook with spices that night and have a go. And as it's a kind of challenge to people in business. It's not, there are references to theory, and you and I know how much good science there is now behind how the brain creates new ideas, but it's very practical things you can do the next day to radically change the way you think about work and the way you develop new ideas. I mean, one very small one, for example, is to ring fence some time each day or each week for free thinking and for creativity. Goes back to that point I made earlier about kind of there are times you don't want to mix the two. So switch off your emails and do something expansive. It could be as simple as looking out the window, but it's researching a topic, maybe it's speaking to somebody you haven't spoken to before. It could be going out for a walk and letting your mind wander. You'll remember one of our podcast guests said that daydreaming is one of the great superpowers. And I completely agree with that. And if you're a boss in a big business and you see someone daydreaming, you see them looking out the window, you should give them a bonus. They're working hard. They're accessing their creative brain maybe developing the big new breakthrough for your company. It's not a habit to be criticized. In fact, it's a very important part of being creative.
And that's actually you speak about previous guests about mind wandering, and we've had a lot of people talk about mind wandering over the years, but a recent guest, Rowan, who's a speed painter, she talked about she's trying to get a daughter to wash the dishes, and she made it very important. She made a point of making daydreaming an important thing to do. And so when she asked her to do the dishes, she said, "No, Mum, I'm daydreaming." So
How to get out of doing the dishes.
I love that. And because what I really like about this approach it's not a thing about all on. And I see it come back to the, cooking analogy, because to the basis is that, a well-spiced meal is all about the balance. And you've talked about this, about the fact that, sometimes it really has to be, we've got to do the pragmatic stuff. What tips have you in there for both employers and employees about creating this balance of flavors of the creative and the pragmatic, if you like to move forward, so that we can still make money?
Well, that's right. Because this book is primarily designed for people at work, trying to work for a big business, trying to make money. Actually, I think a lot of the lessons apply to kind of life itself, and much more broadly than that. So I mentioned the idea of ring fencing some time. The second idea, which I've touched on already, is to allow your mind to wander. And the neuroscientists would say it's all about allowing the salient network inside your brain to promote ideas from the default network. But it's kind of like going for a walk at lunchtime, or it might be acknowledging that when you're in the shower and you come and drift into a different space, that your brain might well develop some really interesting stuff, and to not ignore that, in fact, to embrace it and kind of bring that with you to work. I think there's another practical tip, which I've seen some senior leaders embrace. In fact, if you remember one of our guests on The Common Creative, Stephen Basil-Jones, embrace the idea of not knowing. How are you going to develop something new unless you accept that you don't know everything? And now the world of work hates that concept. It's kind of what's the evidence? What's your number? Show, give me the forecast, identify the risks. And so another habit I think is really important to embrace in the Spice Group is this idea we don't know yet. We don't know where this is going to go. In fact, the very fact that we don't know allows us to explore new stuff. There's another practical tip. While I'm on a roll, let me just throw in one I think is really important, is this idea of learning. Learning, everything is about learning. Whether it goes well or whether it didn't go to plan, it delivers learnings for you, not failures. Businesses love to beat up people who deliver a failure. But success has many fathers, and failure has a vast. But businesses that thrive on creativity need to accept there will be a lot of times when things don't go to plan. Because by definition, it's new, you haven't done it before, and things might not go to plan. But unless you embrace this idea and then the learnings that come from things not going to plan, you ain't going to get new stuff. So the phrase, "I don't know," I think should be celebrated in a creative culture. And I can't think of many businesses that do that yet. I do know of some, but I would love to see particularly business leaders celebrating the idea of "I don't know." And the guy I mentioned, Stephen Basil-Jones, you remember the quote he shared with us was, "I know nothing." That was his guiding principle for leadership. I thought that was inspirational.
Yes, Chris, that's a really good point, because certainly the old style leadership was, thumping the table. This is where I'm going, even if the leader knew where they were going or not, because, it'd be set. So, and look, in that whole thing about "I don't know," and, back to your spice analogy, the spice trade, from its very beginning has always been big business, but it can be out about, curiosity to explore the world, but then also, the curiosity of people to try these new spices and flavors and stuff. And so, it's interesting that, when someone came across the first nutmeg tree, they would have thought, well, this is pretty boring.
Yeah. Or think about the first person to try a chili and go, who in their right mind would eat this stuff?
Besides it's right. Yeah. So I think it's very interesting, Chris.
I'd love it if maybe it should become like a New Year's resolution for people, which is to kind of to make a commitment to take some risks, to try some spice, if you like, and to learn about their own style of creativity, and to learn how to use this stuff to do more than just have some fun and paint some pictures, but to deliver some stuff, either for their workplace or outside their workplace. We all know, we all have it inside us. What's extraordinary is how we're not encouraged, we're not trained, we're not supported to be creative. I'm hoping it's not a recipe book, but it's going to feel like a recipe of simple steps you can take in the workplace to be more creative.
Well, that's great, Chris. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And obviously, I'll be keeping track of your progress.
Thank
get
you.
this book out, and I look forward to it. It sounds like a great read, and hopefully I'll get to experience your keynote along the way as well.
Stand by for some chili sauce to go with it. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Chris.